Of two of the main ways that you can use to layer cardstock, the one is significantly easier than the other, and I want to make sure that you know exactly how to layer cardstock just in case this comes up in a project that you might want to do. The one project type will save you materials, but it'll take you quite a bit longer to complete as you've got to glue down each individual piece, and you may even misalign some. I know I do. The other project type uses a little bit more paper, but it's much quicker to put together, and you tend to get more consistent results with this project type as well. And that's the one that we're going to be going over today. My name is Kelly Rossouw, and let's get clacking. Now, the type of file that you're going to need for this particular project is quite specific, and I'm going to be using this file from Creative Fabrica. Creative Fabrica genuinely is the first place that I go to when I'm looking for inspiration or looking for a file, and I find that their subscription serves me in so many different ways, and I really love being able to use it in so many different crafts that I do. So if you don't have a Creative Fabrica subscription, I genuinely highly recommend getting one. They're also always having sales, and then you can get your subscription for really cheap at only $47 for an additional year on your subscription. And also, if you didn't know, you can actually buy a few at a time. So if you have a little bit of extra money and you want to invest in 2 or 3 years, then you can just kind of purchase on top of what you already have, which I find super useful. And if you don't have a subscription, you can check my link down below for a subscription that works out to just under $5 a month. It is well worth it considering the price of SVGs these days, so I'm just going to use this graphic. Now you can see that this graphic has multiple layers. So there's 2 different colors, and you can use one, of course, with more colors than this, or especially if you want to change some of the colors, that can also totally be done. So I'm going to just click the download link and download the file, and then I'm going to save it to my computer and upload it into Cricut Design Space. And once I've uploaded it and added it to my canvas, we can start playing around. I'm first going to change the size of the object, as it's always a lot bigger than what I need it. So I'm going to make it 15 centimeters or 6 inches. But again, size is totally up to you. Now with this one, I want to have 3 different layers. So currently it's kind of only 1 layer, and each file itself will be set up differently because each file is created by a different person. So the next steps may vary depending on which file you have chosen, but if you're using this file just to get a test for this method, then you'll need to follow these steps. So we're first going to look at the layers panel on the right hand side of the screen and uncollapse the layers so we can see what the file looks like and how it's structured. So at the moment there are lots of little stars on the moon, and then there's another layer on the outside. So we can take that outside layer away, and then I'm going to change that back to 15 centimeters. So our moon is 15 centimeters, as I don't want the extra ring on the outside. The next step to get everybody onto the same level, I want this all to be 1 layer. Now currently it's multiple different layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this group where it includes all of our stars and the moon. And I'm going to, like I said, make it into 1 layer so that I can use the contour feature to play around with the design. So I'm going to click on Combine, and then I'm going to click on Weld. Now what this does is it brings everything into 1 layer so that we can play around with it. So when I then click on Contour, I can now see all of the elements and play around with them one by one. Pick and choose what I want to see, and I find this a lot easier to work with. Now the next step is to make sure that we have the amount of layers that we want to play with. So I'm going to right click and click Duplicate. And then I'm going to duplicate that again, because I want to work with 3 different layers. So the second layer color is going to be white, and the third layer color I'm going to change to yellow. Now, not all SVGs, like I said, will behave in the same way, so the steps that you might take are going to be a little bit different. But I'm going to start with the black layer. That will be our top layer. So I'm going to click on the contour button, And I'm going to remove all of the little stars that are inside the first moon. And I'm going to do that just by clicking on them. And it's very often a little bit of a struggle because they don't line up with the mouse 100% perfectly. So it is a little bit of a pain sometimes. And sometimes you might deselect the moon, but it's fine. You can just reselect it. And they've also changed the way that the contour panel on the right hand side works. So you can't just select them in size order anymore. Once we've selected or deselected all of the stars, we're going to click away from the layers panel. And that's what I want my top layer to look like. My top layer, I don't want anything in the moon section, but I want all of these little stars to shine through. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top layer, and that is going to be my most detailed layer, and we're going to lose detail as we go further and further back in the layers on our design. So I'm going to do a similar thing with the white layer, and I'm going to click on contour and remove everything that I don't want. So now we're going to be removing fewer things, so I'm going to just remove the moon in this case. If you want to remove the stars as well, you can also do that. If you don't feel like clicking on them, you can just duplicate the black layer. And in this case, I want to leave the stars there. Even though for some reason on this SVG, you can't see the background through those stars, I know that the lines are there, so they're going to be cut. So I'm fine with leaving it like that. And then the third layer will have even less detail. So I'm going to click on contour again. And in this case, I'm just going to click hide all contours. I want it to just be a solid circle, and you'll see why as soon as we start layering and lining them up. Now I want to change the order because the yellow one is in front of the white one, which is also in front of the black one. So the layers are just shifted around. So I'm going to right click on the white one and bring it to the front so that it's in front of the yellow. And then I'm going to right click on the black and bring it to the front as well. You can also play around with the layers in the layers panel if you want, and just click and drag them to where you need to be. That's also totally fine. Now, I like to be able to get a preview of my project on the canvas before I cut it, just to make sure that I don't want to make any adjustments. So I'm going to select all three of the layers, click align and center. And like I said, for some reason this SVG doesn't allow these stars to shine through, so we can't get a true indication of what it's going to look like. But I do think that maybe what I want to do is to remove the stars from the moon and have just the stars shining through on the outside. So now that I've looked at this project, I can see, okay, maybe it's not exactly what I want, and I can make some changes, which is why I like to have the colors aligned and all my layers aligned before I go and cut. So I'm going to go back to the white layer and contour out all of these little stars, just like I did on the black layer. And like I said, if you don't feel like doing this, you might be able to duplicate another layer that you've already done this work on, just to save yourself some time. There we go. I find that that looks a lot better. Now we have more emphasis on the stars that are on the outside of the moon, and I'm very happy with that. And we have already changed the sizing, so I don't need to worry about the size of the project. And I can just click make it and save my project before I go on to cut. Layered stars and moon. And now we can just cut our project, which is the fun part. So we're going to start with the white cardstock, move on to the yellow, and then the black. So I'm going to click continue, connect to my machine. Now that my machine is connected, I'm going to choose the cut setting. I like to cut my cardstock on intricate cuts for cardstock by default. Yes, it takes double the amount of time, but I find that I get much better cuts from this, especially because in this particular project, we are working with quite fine designs, so I want to make sure they're going to come out right. So I'm going to click Browse All Materials, scroll down to the cardstock section and choose the cardstock for intricate cuts. Now I don't have it bookmarked on this machine, so I'm going to bookmark the material, select it and click done. And then I'm going to load up my cardstock onto my mat. Make sure to use my brayer to make sure that the cardstock is really stuck down well, and this is always so important to use. I'm then going to load it into the machine, cut the first layer, and make sure to check the cut before I unload the mat from the machine. Just to make sure that the cut has gone all the way through and has cut correctly. If it hasn't cut correctly, make sure to press the play button once more so that it'll repeat the cut for you. Cut the other 2 layers and then we can get to assembling. If you are new to Cardstock Crafts, I've created a Cricut Cardstock Jumpstart workbook. It has over 60 pages of information, including tips, tricks, methods, step-by-step workflows, all relating to cardstock crafts for beginners. So if you are not quite sure on which cardstock you want to use, which mat you need to use, whether you need to be using the scoring wheel or the scoring stylus, what accessories you may need for your Cricut cardstock projects, then this workbook explains all of that and so much more for only $19. And if you want a discount code to get it a little bit cheaper, sign up to my mailing list below and I will send you a discount code. I know you'll love it just as much as these people have loved it here, so go ahead and enjoy. And now we're going to get back to the video. And of course, whenever you're working with cardstock, always make sure to flip the mat over and remove the mat from the cardstock instead of the other way around. We're then going to separate any pieces that might not have completely loosened, as the darker cardstocks tend to be just a little bit thicker and harder to cut than the lighter colors. So some of them just might need a little bit of convincing, but the pieces should still pop out perfectly well. And now that we have all of our pieces cut, we can glue them all together. Depending on what look you're going for, you can use either normal glue or a foam tape. Foam tape allows you to add dimension in between the layers and it can be really nice. But for this project, because the details are quite small, I don't want to have any of the color of the moon peeking through. So I'm going to glue these 2 layers together, but I absolutely can use some foam tape between this layer and that layer. So for a lot of projects, I like to mix it up a little bit and kind of change up how I do things. So I'm going to just add some glue to the back of the top layer, move that out the way, because I don't want to accidentally add any glue onto this layer where the moon is showing through. So I like to always put glue on the top layer or any kind of adhesive on the layer above the one that's going to be pressed down. And you don't need a whole lot of glue, especially if it's not super intricate like this. And in these cases, I prefer to use glue because I can wiggle it around a little bit. If I were using tape, it would be a lot more difficult to get it to line up before it's stuck down. So I'll try and put it down on the page as close to where it needs to be before placing it down. And you can see there how it's slightly misaligned. So I will just line that up a little better. And you can just kind of move it into place before lining it up. There we go. So now we can see that it's see-through behind that one, and we can place our gold behind that. And you absolutely can just layer it on top, or if you put some foam tape on it, it'll add some dimension, which will add a little bit of sparkle and interest to it. So I'm going to put some foam tape on this layer. And because I'm working with adhesives, I like to use my Teflon covered scissors because the adhesive doesn't stick to them as much. So I'm just going to cut myself a few pieces of foam tape and start laying them down. Foam tape is not terribly expensive, so I'd rather use a little bit more than I think I might need, especially around the edges to support the project. And of course, try not to put foam tape over the edges of something, even like over the edge there. I want to cut that down so that it's not visible from the top of the project. And then we can take off one piece of foam tape. I like to always start with one just so that I can get everything lined up first. And I'll try and hold that piece up So where I have the piece of the foam tape, I'll put my fingers on either side just to raise it up so that it doesn't touch the cardstock. I'll then line up the project as well as I can, and normally it's out by like 1 millimeter or so, but that should be all right. And once I'm happy with the alignment that I have, I'm going to press that section down so that the project is lined up but not yet completely stuck down. We still have the tape on the back of everything else. So from here, I'll take my weeding tool and gently remove the rest of the tape. And when I'm removing the tape, I generally start from the closest section to where the original piece of tape that is stuck down, and I'll move my way up so that just in case I let this piece go or drop it by accident, there's not pieces of tape stuck there with the backing still on. And once you have the backing all removed, you can just let that go, gently pat it down. It won't need very much encouragement, and you can turn over and see your project complete. And you can see how not only does the foil give it that extra shine, but the foam tape that we've added adds a little bit of dimension, which adds some shadow and adds some interest. Now this kind of project is much quicker to do than having to cut out each individual star, circle, or anything like that and having to stick them all down individually. Because we've cut them out of the top layer, we can have a beautiful project in much less time. But if your cardstock cuts haven't quite come out as intricate as this, you might want to check out my Cardstock for Intricate Cuts video, which should be on your screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you over there, and remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.